I'm about to go ham. Yeah, I'm about to go ham. I'm about to go ham. Yeah, I'm about to go ham.
Welcome back to another edition of the Goin Ham podcast. It's been a long hiatus. I know the dog days of summer are upon us, but I promise you, we will get to sports next week. We're going to have an NBA draft podcast. We're going to have a World Cup Team USA edition podcast. But today, it's all about Game of Thrones. They just had their season finale. We're going to have my man Corey DeMoss on. He's a Game of Thrones expert. He works for Fox Sports out in LA. He really breaks things down on a whole nother level. So he's really good. We'll have him on. Then we're going to have my dad on at the very end to talk about Tyrion. Me and him were both worried that our favorite character, Tyrion, was not going to live to see the next season. But he did. We'll break that down. Let's get right to it. All right, Corey, thanks for coming back on the show, man. How's life in LA?
Oh, it's not too bad. I can't complain.
Good weather? No earthquakes? No earthquakes?
No earthquakes in the last few weeks, so we're good. The big one is only a matter of time, though, so everybody's a little on edge.
That's true. Well, we got a lot of small ones over here. I know you used to live here, but the earthquakes are here and you're not, so it's kind of a crazy thing. You moved to California.
Yeah, that's very strange. Oklahoma has pretty much the worst weather I've ever experienced.
It's terrible. But I wanted to have you on. Game of Thrones season finale. I can't believe we have to wait another year for this show to come back. It's going to be a long year.
Yep.
I don't really know where to start other than just did it satisfy you? Were you happy with the way they kind of ended the season finale?
Yes, absolutely. I thought, and it's what we talked about last week, that it was going to have to be more action-packed than their previous finales have been, just because there's so much that was going on, and it was. There was a lot more story development going on and plot development and a lot more big, oh my God moments. And I thought most of them delivered. I didn't think it was perfect by any means. Almost no episode of TV ever is perfect, but it was really, really good, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was almost like they were trying to cram everything in. Like they were jumping around real quick. It was almost like 2 episodes that they kind of squeezed into one just to kind of get it all in there.
Yeah, and that was one of the issues. A couple scenes felt a little rushed. I mean, that's kind of gonna happen when you have to cram it into an hour, and that's more not a problem with this episode in particular, but a problem over the last few episodes that they could have spaced some things out a little better.
Right.
Had a couple things happen earlier in the season to let stuff in the finale breathe a little bit. But I mean, that's a fairly minor quibble.
Right. Well, I'm going to kind of jump around kind of like the show does. I'm going to go from my least interesting characters to my most. So
Okay.
Tyrion's coming up at the end.
Right.
But first, actually the show started out at the Wall with Jon Snow going to negotiate with Mance Rayder, and then Stannis crashes the party.
Yep.
Did you like that? I'm confused. I know Stannis was in Braavos and he bought this army, and then he's in the cold with no cold clothes. He just storms the party out of nowhere. I didn't see that coming at all.
That was the point. That it's supposed to be a surprise. They hinted at it because Davos brings it up that he finds the letter asking for help from the Wall, and brings it to Stannis, and then that's why they went to Braavos to get the money to hire an army to sail north. And they did talk about that, but then he disappeared for a couple episodes, and that was the point, for him to disappear and you kind of forget about him, and then he shows up out of the blue and you're like, oh, that's where he was going. That's why he hasn't been around. Because you can't show 2 episodes of him just sailing on a ship, because that's not very exciting.
Well, and it really showed the difference between the fighting skill of an actual army and the wildlings. They mowed right through them. Yeah,
that's what I thought was great, that it showed the really strict, precise lines that they'd formed, with the horses coming in from both sides like a pincer attack, and then as soon as they start rolling in, the wildlings just go crazy and start running in every direction, and it was like a buzzsaw. They just ran right through them, and they talked about that on the show before, that's why the Watch was so confident they could beat the wildlings, because they're not a trained army. They're just a bunch of people fighting.
Right.
A bunch of singular people fighting and trying to kill people. But an actual army has, commanders and strategy and formations and all that stuff. And you see why that's important. They just, like you said, they just mowed right through them.
And I know Stannis isn't the most warm character. He's not the most outgoing. But I thought he would have showed a little more respect to Jon Snow. I mean, Ned Stark risks his life and ultimately it costs him his life to prove that Stannis is the rightful heir to the throne. And he's just like, oh yeah, your dad was cool. I was expecting a little more respect shown from Stannis to Jon Snow.
I think what Stannis did when he actually asked Jon Snow's opinion, and then Jon Snow gave his opinion, and he heeded it and changed his mind based on Jon Snow's direction, that's about as much respect as you're going to get from Stannis. Like he's not going to lick your boots or anything. He will ask you what you think, and if he respects you, he'll listen to you. And listening to Jon Snow is a pretty good sign of respect.
He's not going to have you over for wine. Is that what you're telling me?
No. Stannis won't be hosting any dinner parties.
Okay, that's. I wanted a little more respect, but I guess that's the most he can kind of offer.
Yeah, that's just kind of built into how he's a very dull guy, but he's kind of with Ned gone, he's kind of the most honor-bound guy left on the show. Who that's all he cares about is honor and nothing else.
Yeah, those are few and far between nowadays. Man.
Yeah.
I do like where Jon Snow's kind of heading. Like, I feel like we're finally seeing some of the payoff with his storyline at the Wall. He's kind of becoming like a leader, so to speak, at the Wall. Do you feel like his character is kind of coming into form now?
Yes, and this is because he's a natural leader, and he's never really been in the position to actually lead before, which is why part of his character has been kind of dull, because a leader is only interesting if they're actually leading.
Right.
And now he's getting to the point where he is becoming more of a factor and more of a leadership force. And that's what I'm interested to see what the show does with that dynamic, with the Stannis, Melisandre, Jon dynamic of who takes the leadership role there and who becomes more submissive, or do they clash heads? What happens there? Because, I mean, I know the books portrayed in a certain way, and I'm not positive based on because they've made changes to the Wall storyline. And based on those changes, I think they might change that relationship a little bit. And I'm intrigued to see how that pans out. Who becomes like the main leader at the Wall. Yeah. And who just does the bidding of the other.
Well, I noticed Melisandre kind of eyeballing Jon Snow across the fire. That was a little heated there. So that's going to be interesting.
That could be some foreshadowing.
Well, that's the thing. You brought that up, the difference between the books and the show. I just want to ask you, isn't that kind of exciting? Even though you've read the books, you kind of know the general outlook of what's going to happen. Isn't it kind of exciting for you, not knowing what they're going to kind of switch up?
Absolutely, yes. And they're starting to change more and more as the seasons go. And I knew that was going to be the case because the just as the books went on, there's a lot of fat that needs to be trimmed out. So I knew the show was going to start taking more liberties with the storyline. And it started to show in this episode. And this episode is when they made some of the biggest divergences from the book. And it is exciting. They're not going to change anything hugely significant. Like, somebody's not going to live in the show who died in the books. But they do change little things like motivations for characters and, the order of events of some characters. And they add scenes and they add dialogue and stuff like that. And I'm always really excited to see that stuff because usually it's really well done. It's really good and well done and makes sense with, everything that's been put in the show already. So, yeah, I love it when they do that. I love when they make changes.
Yeah, these guys know what they're doing. These guys are awesome.
Yeah, they're really good.
I really enjoy getting on demand, and they kind of recap the episode and talk about the characters and what they were thinking and all that stuff. That's really kind of helped me, a guy that hasn't read the books, just get on demand and hear what they have to say. Okay, we're going to get weird. Let's get weird, Corey.
Yeah, I know.
Bran Stark going to this tree that has a face. There's skeletons crawling out of the ground trying to kill him.
Yeah.
The thing I love most about this show is that it's a fantasy, but it's really just about people and decisions that they make. Right. And to me, that's the most fascinating part. So I'm a little concerned that we're going to take a turn to Weird Town like we did with Bran Stark. Just talk me off the ledge here with this Bran Stark.
Yeah, I knew. I imagine you're not the only person that's worried about that. That scene is about as much straight up fantasy as the show is ever going to have, as long as they don't really stray from the books.
I feel better already. Okay.
Like that scene in the books is pretty much the most on the nose high fantasy stuff in the whole series. And the fireball thing actually was not in the books. Really? The children of the forest are a little bit different in the books, but that's because they'd be impossible to actually show on TV because I wouldn't be able to describe it in things that make any sense anyway right now.
Okay.
But they're not. They don't really. They kind of look like humans, but they're not really human, and so they'd be really hard to show visually. So they just changed it to a little girl who can throw fireballs. And, that's a change that I'm okay with. It wasn't that big of a deal. But, yes, there's no worries about that suddenly becoming something that happens every episode.
Okay.
That won't happen again.
That's a relief. Okay, so they get past the skeletons. We lose Jojin, which I wasn't all that broken up about because we didn't really get to know him that well. But they get inside this tree, and there's this old man there, and he says he's the three-eyed raven. I mean, help me. Okay, he's been kind of watching over Bran and all these people this whole time. I didn't really understand any of that.
Yeah, that's something they're probably going to reveal in the next season.
Okay,
so
well, I guess I'm not supposed to know what's going on.
Yeah, so I don't want to spoil that part. I don't want to spoil it because, he hints at stuff. Like he says, you're not going to learn to walk. You're not going to walk again, but you'll learn to fly. Yeah. And he says, I'll be keeping an eye on you and stuff. So that's all you're really supposed to know.
Okay.
I assume they will tell you how he knows these things and what he means by fly instead of walk. But the other thing I will say is that this is the biggest divergence from the book in that Bran's storyline is way ahead of everyone else.
Really?
Like what happened at the end of this episode is Bran's storyline at the end of book 5, and everybody else is at the end of book 3 or at the beginning of book 4. So so I'm assuming basically his storyline next season is going to be mostly made up by the showrunners. Like it's going to be mostly created for the show.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of intrigued by it is how they're going to fill in that space. And I do know the answer to your question of, how does he know these things?
Right.
But they'll tell you that.
I'm just an overzealous fan, I guess. How many books are there again?
There's been 5 so far.
There's only 5. Okay.
And the 6th one is supposed to come out soon. It's scheduled for next year.
Gosh, so they're already pretty much to the last book with Bran. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I guess is that an indictment on his character that they're having to skip over everything?
Well, no. Part of it is they changed some of Jon Snow's stuff too. Part of it is just that those characters, Jon and Bran, a lot of their stuff from the books, a lot of what makes them interesting characters in the books is internal monologue, which you get in because they're point of view characters, so you see events through their eyes and you hear their thoughts and all that stuff. Okay. And there's not a lot of outside stuff that happens to Bran. So a lot of Bran's storyline is traveling north and then you living in his head and seeing his dreams and hearing how he interprets those dreams and what he thinks about these things. And so his storyline is really difficult to show visually because there's just not a lot of stuff that happens to him or that he does, obviously, because he can't walk. So he doesn't do a lot of stuff until he gets to this point where he is in the show. And now let's see what happens. Okay. Now he can actually start doing stuff because he doesn't have to walk.
Let's get weird, Bran Stark. Okay, we'll have to revisit him next season. I'm interested. I do have a prediction, though. And when he said he's going to fly, and you don't have to say anything, I'll move on quickly. But I think he's going to warg. Is that what it's called? Warging?
Yep.
I think he's going to warg in a dragon at some point.
That's a very common fan theory. Okay. I can't confirm that because that hasn't happened in the books.
I think Drogon or whatever, and that leads me to my next point. Drogon, the ruthless dragon that's on the loose. I think he might
the rogue dragon.
He might be warging with him sometime soon. Which great segue. That leads me to Daenerys. I think my dad's favorite character, other than Tyrion. She's kind of been on the sidelines this season. She's been kind of ruling Marine, posting up shop, and she's not ruling well. What do you think about her storyline this season?
Well, that's one of the things I like about the books is that one of the biggest, probably the biggest theme that it investigates is power and what power means and the fact that sometimes it's a lot easier to acquire power than to keep power and that conquering a place is a lot different than ruling a place. And that's basically what this whole season of Daenerys is. That's been the point, is that she was mowing through all these people. She got her dragons, and she's just dominated ever since, conquering all these places. And that she thought she was a badass because she conquered all these places. And then she realized that actually sitting down and ruling and leading people is way different and is a lot harder, especially when there's, a cultural gap and a racial gap and just generally she's trying to completely change the way these people live. And sometimes, even if the conditions were awful, people still want that because they don't want change. And so it's been an interesting way of. It's one of those things that you kind of have to look at it from a more broad perspective to really appreciate her storyline. Because, like you said, she hasn't really been doing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly been her sitting in a throne room and having people walk in and tell her their problems, and her just kind of trying to deal with them one by one. But when you look at it more broadly, the whole message is she's not as awesome as she thought she was, and she wasn't ready to conquer Westeros, because once she conquered Westeros, what was she going to do then?
Yeah,
If she'd be having the same problems that she's having now, but on a much bigger scale, because she just tried to conquer, all the Seven Kingdoms and take the Iron Throne.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what this is doing: is it's teaching her how to actually rule before she tries to make the big leap and go to. She's just leading one small, basically, state. If we're going to put it in common terms. She's leading a state now. She wants to lead a nation later. And so she's becoming a senator in preparation for becoming a president, if we're going to go with some current American politics analog.
I like the analogy that she's paying her dues in the minors before she gets the call to the big leagues.
That's a good one, too. Yeah.
You've kind of laid that out pretty well. That makes me feel a lot better about her storyline. When did she get all these titles? It takes them like 30 minutes to read off all of her titles.
Yeah, at this point, it's got to be a running joke with the writers that every time she's introduced, they read off every title she's ever had. And she does have. I mean, those are different groups of people call her all those things, because she was, the Khaleesi with the Dothraki, and now she's, the Unburnt because of the dragons and Mother of Dragons, and now she's taking over Marine, so she's got a new title. But every time they introduce her, it's always, let's read off all 8 of her titles.
Yeah, I need to get me some titles, I think.
That sounds pretty awesome. And have people say them in made-up languages.
Exactly.
That makes it sound even better.
It just sounds cool. I was kind of upset that they recast Dario, but now that I see like the storyline that they had this season, the actor was like, okay, we're not doing much. I'm out of here. What did you think of the recast?
Well, it's always weird when they do that. I mean, this one, they didn't really have a choice, because the original actor left to do the Transporter movies. So, I mean, he was out. So they just had to replace him. There was no choice. And that character is too important to just, write him out. Mm-hmm. But, the one with the mountain, they recasted the mountain 3 times now, or recast him twice, had 3 people. And that one threw me off a little bit more. I think Dario I'm okay with, mostly because he didn't really do much this season. So you had kind of a season where, you introduced this new guy. Okay, now he's Dario. You're okay with him now. So next season, when he's got more to do, you'll be okay with him.
Wouldn't more people watch Game of Thrones than Transporter 6 or whatever they're on now?
Yeah, but he can be, I don't know what number they're on now, but he can make more money, I assume, because on Game of Thrones, he's the 30th person in the cast, and on Transporter, he can be 2 or 3.
Yeah, I guess it's like when you talk about major leaguers, or professional basketball players. Oh, just give up $2 or $3 million to go play here. Well, no, that's $2 or $3 million. So money
exactly.
talks.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
You put aside the money when you're not the one making it.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot easier to say that now. And I mean, then you can get on guys who want to go somewhere for $20 million instead of $15 million, because you're like, okay, that $5 million, what difference does that make? But in this case, it's something like the difference between $500,000 and $3 million. You're like, okay, that's a big difference.
Okay.
So go do what you want to do. And
all right. Well, I'll miss you the first Dario. I'm not a big fan of the new guy. I just don't.
Yeah.
He doesn't strike
I think
me
the
as
new guy is
a better.
I think the new guy is a better actor. I think he's shown more with the character. And
I just feel like the other guy was a bigger badass.
Yeah, that's true. And this year the guy didn't have a chance to prove being a badass. He had that one almost joke fight scene.
Yeah,
that
was pretty incredible. Yeah, that was pretty good.
But he hasn't really had a chance to really do much. Okay. So we'll see if he can handle more badass stuff.
Okay, I'm willing to accept him. I miss the old Dario. He was more of a Rico Suave.
It's always really weird when shows have to recast different actors as the same character, because then you can't really call attention to it, because then you can't really say, oh, you look different, because that would be kind of hacky.
That'd be real hacky.
So they just don't do it. They don't say anything about it, and then it takes you a minute to even realize that it's the same guy.
Okay, Daenerys' time is coming. I think she's paying her dues in the minors. I think next year is going to be her big breakout. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. And this one is tough for me. This is I'm a big MMA fan, and sometimes my 2 favorite guys will fight each other, and it's sad to me because I know one's going to have to lose.
Yeah.
Brienne versus the Hound.
Yeah.
The Rumble and the Eerie. When they met, I was like, this is going to happen. I don't want to watch. This is terrible. I was upset. What did you make of that scene?
Well, that's I will say that's a creation by the show. That's not how that went down in the books. They did not; those two characters did not ever meet each other in the books.
Okay.
And I loved it. That's as soon as they crossed paths, I was like, oh, I wonder how this is going to go, because they obviously aren't going to get along, but they're both really well liked characters. So how are they going to do this? And then that fight is probably the most brutal fight they've had on the whole show. It just quickly.
Oberyn would argue with you on that one.
Well, yeah, that one, that scene was. That
but you're
one,
right. As far as
ending.
in totality.
Yeah, because the Hound Brienne fight was it started out, and that's one of the things the book does is it delves into all these things that, especially in medieval societies, they all wanted to talk about glorious battle and how it's beautiful and honorable and all this stuff. But really, it's not. There's people knocking each other's teeth out and, crapping their pants. And, it's dirty,
biting
gross.
Each other's ears off.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the actual battle is not as honorable as the songs and the legends make it sound. And this is the perfect example of that. They start out, doing a classic normal duel. They got their swords out and they're fighting honorably and whatever. And it almost immediately just devolves into crotch kicking and ear biting and
any means necessary.
Yeah, doing anything you have to do to beat the other person, and they're screaming and shrieking at each other, and I thought that was extremely well done. And then of course you have the ending that made a lot of the Hound is one of those guys who is a kind of a bastard, but you root for him anyway. Like, he's not a great guy. He's kind of a bad guy. But it's kind of sad to see him go. It's a little sad.
He really had become probably one of my favorite characters, maybe number one. I mean, Tyrion's been kind of doing his own thing in jail or whatever, and we'll get to him. But like his dialogue and his one-liners, he was probably my favorite character this season. So I was devastated to see him go. But
yeah, he's one of the MVPs. And also she gives some I know this cast has so many incredible actors, and Peter Dinklage rightfully gets a ton of credit, but Rory McCann, who plays the Hound, should get a ton of credit for especially this episode. He killed it. Every scene he was in, he was so good.
Yeah, like the line he had about her mother's dead, her brother's dead, her sister's dead. Like, if you think there's a safe place out there, you're the wrong person for this job. Like, he was awesome. Yeah,
and he's totally right that he revealed part of Brienne, that her tunnel vision. She doesn't really think about anything else, and he's right that there's not anywhere safe for Arya or anybody else.
Yeah.
That if you think like that, then you're probably not the right person for the job, and he was right.
And Arya and the Hound had a weird dynamic in that it became clear that they probably didn't like each other, obviously, but they kind of respected each other. So I thought it was weird that Arya wouldn't do him a solid and put him out of his misery. I thought she had kind of grown to like him. I know he was still on her to kill list.
Yeah.
But I thought they had kind of grown together, and she kind of liked him to a certain degree. Why did she take his money and not give him mercy? Well,
so that's an interesting. That's lots of different people bring their own stuff to that. But I thought the interesting thing about the season in general, the two of them hanging out, is that they kind of started affecting each other, and that the Hound softened up a little bit and Arya hardened as they hung out. Arya was softer and the Hound was hard, obviously, and then they kind of started shifting toward the middle of the spectrum and met in the middle. And in his last moments, the Hound became softer than Arya. And I mean, you could say it that it's not clear what her motivation is. Is it that she just doesn't care? She's just so indifferent that she's saying, well, whatever, I don't care if you want mercy, I'm done with you, and that's all I care about? Or is it that, well, I don't want to kill you because I don't know what could happen, and I'm just going to let fate decide what happens to you, and I'm just going to take off, and then whatever happens, happens. Because you can't analyze it that she didn't want to be the one to kill him because she kind of did like him, and maybe something miraculous happens and there was a maester hiding behind that rock, and he ends up being saved. And I guess it's the kind of thing that now she can tell herself, well, maybe he survived and he's going to be okay. Whereas if she killed him, she would know for sure that he's not.
Yeah.
So
It seemed like it was kind of payback for the butcher's boy too, though, a little bit.
Yeah, it could go either way, and that's what I thought was interesting about that scene. That he asked her mercy, and then when she wasn't doing it, then he basically tried to goad her into doing it out of anger.
Yeah.
That he said, I killed your butcher's boy. I should have raped your sister. He's clearly doing that to get a rise out of her, to get her to do it. And then when she won't do that either, then he just starts to beg, and at that point, she's done. Well,
time to pour one out for my favorite comedic duo. Man, that it was sad to see him go. My dad still seems to think, I'm having to have him on later in the podcast. He still thinks if he doesn't see someone die, he thinks there's a chance they're alive. But I think the Hound's done.
Well, yeah, and basically the point of that scene, his fate doesn't really matter. It's her decision is what matters in that scene.
Right.
That even if he lived, she chose to just leave him, and that's the point of the scene. Not if he lives or dies, because she going forward, obviously she's the main character, not him, and so the scene is about her and the fact that she chose to not do what he wanted, not give him mercy, and just leave him.
And she's headed to Bravos, right? She showed the coin. She said Valar Margulis or whatever, and they're taking her to Bravos, right?
Yes. And
I'm excited for that.
There were some people that had some confusion about that maybe the ship was going north to the wall, but no, it's going east. That coin is basically passage to Bravos. That's what that coin means.
So we might be spending some time in Bravos next season. I'm excited for that.
We will be spending some time in Bravos next season. There's going to, I can tell you, I don't think this is spoiling anything, that there's going to be 2 new locations next year, and it's Bravos and Dorne.
Ooh, I'm ready to go to Dorne. Dorne sounds fun.
Yeah, so there's a new batch of characters and a new batch of locations, and those are the 2 big locations, and you'll meet new people at both places.
Well, they do need new characters, man. They're killing them off left and right.
Exactly. That's part of the reason why they kill people off, is because they've got to fill out the cast the next season.
I'm all in. I can't wait to go to Dorne and have the Martells wreak havoc and get their revenge. Okay, Tyrion. We got to get to Tyrion, the main event.
Yeah.
My Jaime prediction was correct. Of course, in hindsight, it looked like an easy prediction. He's the only one that really cared about Tyrion, so of course... Yeah. He was going to be the one to spring him free.
That's I was hoping I didn't give too much away by telling you that the main characters who die because they make a fatal mistake, and Tyrion hadn't made a fatal mistake, so
that's a good call.
That's why he didn't die.
You were very hinted there. I like that. Yeah. I like it. You like how vague you were.
Yeah.
He sets him free. It looks like he's home free, but he decides I got unfinished business. When he's walking in that room, I think he's going to go kill Cersei. I thought he was going to betray Jaime, and Jaime, let him free. Then he was going to kill the person that Jaime loves most. I was like freaking out, thinking he was going to kill Cersei. And then,
that would have been pretty intense.
And then lo and behold, it's Shay out of nowhere. I know there was a divulgence from the book in that Shay never really loved Tyrion like she did in the show.
Yes.
What was running through your mind when you see that it's Shay in that bed right there?
Well, that was always the case. Here's where, from a non-reader perspective, I'd ask you, because he wasn't going expecting Shay to be there. He was going to confront Tywin. The reason why he turned around and came back was to confront Tywin, and then Shay just happened to be there. So the question for you is, if Shay hadn't been there and that had happened, would he have killed Tywin? Or was he just there to basically berate him and then make his escape?
Well, that's what I don't understand. Like, did he think just walking in the room with Tywin in there, he was going to get out of there? Like that makes no sense. I would think he'd be going there to kill, not to talk, not to hang out, not to try and win his affection or get a reason for why he wanted to kill him, because he knows why. So when he went in there empty-handed, I really was at a loss, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I had no clue.
That's where the divergence from the book comes in. Is that I thought that was the weakest part of that scene. I loved Tyrion's scene with Shay. I thought it was really intense and necessarily kind of graphic and brutal, especially that shot where he's sitting just saying I'm sorry with her dead face hanging upside down next to him.
Yeah.
That was actually kind of a beautiful shot, like morbidly beautiful. But the reason, and I know some people don't like getting into divergences from the book, but Shay is kind of in the show. Shay is kind of a combination of book Shay and Tyrion's first wife, Tysha, who Tyrion mentioned once way back in the first season that he loved this woman and or I guess it wasn't his first wife, it was his first woman he was ever in love with, and that Tywin had revealed to him that this woman was a whore, and then showed Tyrion by making him watch other men sleep with her. And that's a huge moment in the Tyrion-Tywin relationship. That's basically where Tyrion decides, I hate Tywin, and he's awful. That Tywin makes him watch his wife be raped the love of his life be raped by other men. And what's revealed in the books is that Jaime was in on that. And Jaime tells him that actually wasn't a whore. Tywin just paid her a ton of money to basically betray you and act like a whore for that so that you wouldn't go for her.
Oh, my gosh. No wonder he wanted to kill him.
Exactly. So that's why there's so much there. Tyrion and Jaime don't leave on good terms. And that's the other thing. That's why Jaime comes to rescue him. He's felt guilty about it his whole life. Right. And that's always why he's been kinder to Tyrion than everybody else. It's because he knows the secret and he feels horrible about it. And he can't stand that, it's kind of hurt Tyrion so much that he can't ever really fully love again. And there's a lot more going on in that scene. And then Tyrion finds out the details of that and gets so angry that he storms up to kill Tywin. It's very clear, I'm storming up there to kill Tywin, and discovers Shay, and it just puts him even more over the edge.
Yeah.
That's the other
that
change.
Makes more sense, yeah.
In the show, they have Shay attack him, and it's almost half out of self-defense. That never happens either in the book. So he goes up there, sees Shay, and just goes in a murderous rage, kills her, and then storms in and kills Tywin too.
Okay.
And I think that motivation makes more sense, but there was no way they were ever going to do that in the show because they'd only mentioned Tysha once, and it was 3 years ago. So it wouldn't have made any sense to do it that way in the show.
That would have confused everybody, probably.
Yeah, everybody went who the hell is that? I don't know.
And then Tyrion in the show finds Tywin on the porcelain throne, not the iron throne, the toilet of all places.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me like Tywin never really was worried until he got shot. I think he thought he could talk his way out of it like he always does.
Oh, yeah. He was thinking, you're never going to do it. You're never going to go. You've always hated me and you've never done anything about it. Basically, he's, kind of questioning his manhood. Basically, he's saying, Tyrion, you're not man enough to go through with it. And he's never worried about it until he actually gets shot. And I think that's one of the beautiful ways of how he dies, that the most powerful man in King's Landing and Westeros in general, the guy who's controlled everything from the start, who has the most money and scares the most people, he dies sitting on a toilet.
By his own son, yeah.
Who basically he treated terribly his whole life and caused so much resentment. And so it's all these just desserts coming back to him in the most humiliating way possible, that now everybody's going to find out that Tywin Lannister, the most powerful man in the kingdoms, just died sitting on the crapper.
Yeah, when he was skinning the deer in season 1, telling Jaime about the family legacy, I don't think he ever envisioned that it would end on.
No, exactly. That's
throne.
His lasting legacy. That's what people are going to remember of Tywin Lannister.
Oh man, it's like Elvis. He went out like Elvis.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh! And I guess Varys played a role in getting Jaime and Tyrion free. And Varys, it didn't look like he was going to hop on the ship with Tyrion at first, obviously, and then he hears those bells, which I guess the bells signal that something major's gone down.
Yeah.
And he's he puts it 2 and 2 together, and he just
that's why I love Varys. He's so quick on his feet. He knew immediately what those bells, because he said to Tyrion, "What did you do?" Because Tyrion had blood on his face and obviously looked odd.
Yeah.
So he's like, "What did you do?" And then he hears the bells, like, "Oh no, that's what you did." Mm-hmm. And he knows that probably people are going to figure out he's in on it. So he instantly just turns around, gets right back on the boat, and it's like, well, I guess here we are.
He didn't pack. He didn't send loved ones a note. He's like, I'm out. I got to get out of here. He's smart.
Yeah.
That's why he's smarter than everybody else. So, and all in all, I thought this was probably the best season so far. I mean, it was from top to bottom the whole way out. Obviously, there's probably better episodes, like Blackwater probably from season 2. But as far as the whole season, wasn't this probably the best one?
Yeah, I would have to agree. That's what I think, and it's one of those things that probably you realize when you watch it, binge watch it from start to finish, that you realize how much the status quo got blown up this season. That at the end of this season, everybody is in basically new, uncharted waters. Sometimes literally. That Arya is sailing east into, who knows what. Jon and Stannis have now combined, and who knows how that's going to work out. Tywin's dead. Tyrion's on the run. How's that going to affect the power, game in King's Landing that now the most powerful Lannister's gone? Obviously, Cersei doesn't want to marry Loras, so if she backs out of that, is she going to make the Tyrells all angry? And, they've already made Dorne angry by killing Oberyn. So basically at the beginning of the season, it seemed like the Lannisters had won. They'd gone through and they were the victors, that they put everybody else out. Stannis was out.
They were Alabama, yeah.
Basically, they were the team that had just won and was celebrating. And by the end of this season, that's not the case anymore. Joffrey's dead. Tywin's dead. Cersei's now basically the leader because Jaime can't inherit any titles or anything. So Cersei's the leader, and she's shown that she's not the greatest of leaders. So they're kind of in trouble. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that they set up all this stuff, and they kind of did it slowly. They don't all at once just outright tell you, look at how much things have changed. But if you really pay attention, everything has changed. Everything at the end of the season, everybody's character dynamics and the plot that's going on and where they are, in their lives is totally different than at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it was a steady, gradual fall for Alabama, a.k.a. the Lannisters.
Yeah.
I do have one question this season about Jaime, and it's been bothering me all year. I meant to put it out on Twitter. Okay, he gets his hand chopped off.
Yeah.
He gets back home around Tywin, around the shot caller. Did he even ask to go kill the guy that took his hand from him? I mean, they didn't even bring it up. I know Hodor ended up taking care of business for the Lannisters by killing the guy. I forgot his name, but
Locke,
John Locke or whatever. Not John Locke. That's Lost. My bad. Locke chops Jaime's hand off, and Jaime was just like, "Okay, I got to kind of find a way to get on with life."
Yeah, they never really addressed that. That's another change from the books. That Locke character is created by the show. That he didn't exist in the books.
Who chopped his hand off in the book?
It's somebody who doesn't exist in the show.
Okay.
His name was Vargo Hoat in the books, and he's this lisping, awful, horrible guy. Basically, it goes in the order of awfulness. It goes the Mountain number 1, Vargo Hoat number 2. But he's like the most awful, the second most awful.
Okay.
And Vargo Hoat dies by being thrown into the bear pit with that bear that.
Okay. So you might have thought Locke was going to get thrown in there at one point.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay. Because he didn't seem like to care. Okay, just got my hand chopped off.
It's like,
payback or anything.
You're gonna have to deal with this now.
Oh, that bothered me. Oh.
Yeah, that didn't happen that way. They kind of just dropped that whole plot line in the show.
Okay, well I feel
and
better
they're probably hoping that people like you wouldn't notice.
Yeah, it's been bothering me the whole season. I'm like, Jaime, go get some revenge, man. You got your hand chopped off. Yeah. But anyway, and okay, one more Jaime question. We'll get out of here. Why did he? Okay, if Tywin's biggest concern is his family legacy, why in the world did he ever let him join the Kingsguard where he can't continue the family legacy? That makes no sense.
He wasn't supposed to. Well, that's a whole other thing, is that he assumed that Jaime was going to back out of that after killing the Mad King and everything, and that the next king would take over and then, dismiss him from the Kingsguard, and then he could become his natural son and all that. And then Jaime basically stubbornly said, no, I don't want to do that. And Tywin can't make him do anything.
Okay,
he can't. Yeah. Basically, at that point, he doesn't have any power over him, because normally the power would be taking away, leadership and responsibilities and stuff. You can't add. You know what I mean? Like, if Jaime wanted to be the next heir and everything, then he could take that away as punishment. But you can't punish him by adding stuff that he doesn't want.
That's true.
So he just kind of did his own thing, and he said, no, I don't want any of that. I want to be in King's Landing near Cersei, and I want to, take care of Joffrey, and I want to do all this stuff, and I want to try to live honorably. And it hasn't really worked out.
Not so far, but you can tell Jaime's one of my favorite characters, which if you'd have told me that after season 1, I would have told you you're crazy.
Yeah,
but
he's one of the more complicated characters in the show.
Yeah, he's hit or miss. You either love him or you hate him. Anyway, Corey, thanks for coming on, man. It's going to be a long year, man, waiting for this show to come back. But once it's getting close, we're going to have you back on and kind of get fired up again for Game of Thrones. But
I'll always appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We'll probably plow through this season again on DVR and enjoy it all over again. But thanks for coming on, man. We'll have you on again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, now we're bringing on my dad on the show. He was very, very nervous that Tyrion would not live to see the next season. Dad, we watched it together. Tyrion made it out alive, but he did some damage. Just what were your thoughts on the way Tyrion ended the show?
I love the way Tyrion ended the show. I was afraid that he wasn't going to make it, and he not only made it, but he got rid of the old man.
Well, you should.
I guess I shouldn't say that since I'm the old man.
Yeah, you shouldn't approve of such things. What are you talking about? But well, I did think it was interesting that he had a chance to go, and still just could not let it lie. He had to go back and confront Tywin on the porcelain throne of all places.
Well, can you blame him? I mean, Tywin has done nothing but make his life miserable since the day he was born.
Yeah.
Tywin got exactly what he deserved. Couldn't have happened in a better way, like you say. A couple arrows in the heart on the porcelain throne.
he went. I told Corey he kind of went out like Elvis. I mean, Elvis went out on the throne, and that's all people are going to talk about and remember.
Yeah. Well, I don't imagine the good folks of King's Landing will know exactly where he was when he got shot.
I don't know. Word travels. But
yeah.
I mean, were you shocked whenever he went back initially and he found Shay? Who did you think was there? Me and you both were watching it. I kind of thought it was Cersei. I thought he was.
I thought it was his sister.
Yeah, because Jaime set him free, and that really would have pissed off Jaime.
Yeah, so I thought he was going after his sister Cersei.
And when you saw it was Shay, what was your reaction?
Well, then I figured out, that he. So I didn't know he was at his dad's place. I thought he was at Cersei's place. And then when I saw her, I figured out, well, he's at Tywin's place, and Tywin's sleeping with this girl.
Yeah, and that didn't go over too well. Yeah,
didn't go over well at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it might not have gone so bad if she hadn't grabbed a knife and tried to stab him or whatever she planned on doing with it. I think if she had just talked to him, it might have gone a little bit better, but she kind of freaked out on him.
Yeah, didn't go so well, but there was no going back once they saw each other. I think they didn't want to, but they kind of had to. But
well, she betrayed him in the worst possible way, and even as much as he was in love with her, he said, this I'm going to end this.
Yeah. So where do you think not Tywin? Where do you think Tyrion's heading? They put him on a ship in a box. Varys even went along for the ride.
He's going across the narrow sea to whatever they call that place, Essos or whatever. I don't know.
Bravos.
Bravos.
I think Bravos.
That's the banker, isn't it?
The banker place? That's where little Arya's heading, I think.
Yeah. I have no idea where he's going. I just know that he's in the box. Varys has him, and he's still going to be in the show, so I'm happy.
Yeah, that was our biggest concern going into the finale, was that Tyrion was going to make it. But Corey tells me that next season we're going to be going to Bravos, which is the place with the bank, like you mentioned, and Dorne, where Oberyn is from.
Ooh, we're going to Dorne.
We're going to Dorne. I'm fired up for Dorne, aren't you?
I don't know. I don't know what Dorne's like.
Well, I don't either, but I want to go.
Oh, I'm ready to go wherever they take me.
Well, I think Dorne's going to be a little upset with the way things turned out with Oberyn. That's just me.
Oh, yeah. They're not going to be real happy, but, I mean, who's going down there?
Well, I think they'll probably just take us there, kind of like they do with Daenerys. Daenerys, doesn't matter where she's at, we're going. They might just take us to Dorne and introduce new people.
Well, I guess so, but are they going to come to King's Landing and cause some trouble? Or, I mean, I don't...
Well, I would think so. The Lannisters aren't exactly on firm footing now that Tywin's dead.
Yeah, that's true.
I think everybody's going to be coming. Stannis, Dorne, whoever.
I'm not sure the Lannisters was on that good a footing anyway, because apparently Tywin had borrowed so much money he couldn't pay it all back.
Yeah.
He was relying on the Tyrells to pay all of his bills.
Yeah, you were in banking for 25 years. You know that's not a good strategy.
Well, it was only 16 years, but you're right.
Oh, it felt like 25 for me. We're talking kid years. For me, it felt like 25 in kid years.
Okay.
But how sad are you that we have to wait a whole another year for this show?
Oh, it's too long. It's way too long.
I mean, what are we gonna do? I mean, we got the World Cup right now, but what are we gonna do waiting on Game of Thrones?
Big Brother starts Wednesday.
Oh, we can't go from Game of Thrones to Big Brother. I mean, I'll watch Big Brother every now and then, but that doesn't make up the gap.
No. See, there's no Breaking Bad. There's no, I mean, it's gone forever. And now we got to wait till March for this. I mean, we just got to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
we waited for 9 months for this year, so we'll wait another
Yeah.
9 months for next year.
It's like just seeing an old friend from college. You'll see him when you see him, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're glad that Tyrion made it. We're gonna have to wait a whole another year for this show, but Dad.
I'm sad that the Hound got wiped out, but
Oh
I guess
yeah, I meant to bring that up.
Those things happen.
I equated that to like an MMA fight where I like both guys and I know one's gonna lose when Brienne and the Hound hooked up. Just that was kind of a brutal fight.
It was, well, it was about as good as they've had on that show, except for the Oberyn fight in the mountain.
I thought, and Corey thought it was a better fight than the Oberyn one. I disagree.
It was a better fight.
I said Oberyn would disagree with him as far as the brutality, but they did.
Yeah.
She did punch him in the groin and bite his ear off.
Well, yeah, and then she pushed him off the ledge. So but he didn't die instantly. So yeah, he was laying there suffering, and then Arya wouldn't even put him out of his misery.
Yeah, and Corey seems to think that the two, them being together, has made Arya tougher and him a little weaker as the show has gone along, and I tend to agree with that.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah. How about that?
It was sad to see him go. Now you seem to think if we don't see a character die that there's still a chance, kind of like we saw with the Mountain. The Mountain, I guess, is still alive.
Well, I thought the Mountain was dead, and they've got the Mountain plugged into some 500 AD type intravenous something. I don't know how they're keeping him alive.
Well, he was in the city though, and I guess the Hound's out in the country, so it's a little different. He was basically near a hospital, so.
Well, Hound's got to be 99% dead, but when you don't see him die, they can always bring him back.
Yeah, and he's such a popular character. Maybe there was a maester under the rock, like he said. So we'll see. Anyway, Dad, thanks for coming on, Dad. We'll have you on again as hopefully Game of Thrones. We don't have too much withdrawals. We can kind of plow through it on demand if we have to. But we're glad that Tyrion survived, and we're looking forward to next season. So thanks for coming on, Dad.
You bet. Anytime.